Hi there. We're back. We are back on a very, very gloomy day here for Love at First Sight. Hurricane Florence has visited us a little bit. At least we've kind of gotten the tail end of Hurricane Florence, or the outer edges, but there has been a lot of rain and it has been so unbelievably gloomy here. So this is actually the perfect day to talk about names. I'll just give the brief overview. This is Love at First Write. It is a vlog chronicling my endeavors to write an epic series that has romance and thrills and history and mystery, and a bit of archaeology and a bit of the paranormal, and it just has all of these very juicy elements, and I'm just sort of talking out loud to myself and any of my writer friends who may want to listen, or any of my reader friends who are interested, trying to think through how I can make this the best that it could possibly be, and really just hit this one out of the park, because it's just very important to me, and I'm loving writing it, and I really want my readers to love it. I want them to feel as passionately about it as they do my Cold War historical thrillers, which I also love. So, names. Boy, just as a writer, as a parent, as a dog owner, names are incredibly vital to how we feel about a person, actually. I think, my son has just recently downloaded the song Lola by the Kinks. L-O-L-A Lola, and it, as I was listening to it, it occurred to me just how prevalent that name is in that song, and how the memory of this sexual encounter for this sort of young man, for this young man who at that time, certainly at the time it was written, was engaging in deviant sexual behavior, and how validating it was to have this experience with Lola. And and one of my favorite novels of all time, Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita, also starts with her name Lolita, Lolita, and he just goes on and on about how it feels on his tongue. And I certainly remember meeting my husband and thinking how fitting a name Jack was for him. And I've also thought about my own ambivalence about my name, which I have never quite felt is mine, if that makes any sense. And about a year or two ago, I was talking to my mom, and she revealed to me that she had never wanted to name me Victoria. I had a brother who died before I was born. His name was Victor. And I was born, only about a year after he died, and it was very difficult for her to even say my name. And you might be thinking, well, why did she name you Victoria then, for heaven's sake? Well, she had just escaped from Czechoslovakia, communist Czechoslovakia, and her parents were already in the United States, and she hadn't seen them in years. They'd been, separated by this hostile government, and she had been held as a political prisoner. And my grandfather's name was Victor, and my mother's sister's name was Victoria, and she also had a sister named Helen, and her sisters were still trapped behind the Iron Curtain. And my grandparents just really wanted her to name me Victoria. She'd shown up here pregnant with me, and they wanted my mom to name me Victoria Helen. And my mom, just in her need to please them, she'd finally been reunited with her parents. She agreed and regretted it. It was very, very hard for her, so she was always calling me nicknames. And I think somehow I did pick up on this, because Victoria has always been a very difficult name for me to digest. And it's funny because a lot of people want to call me Veronica, which is sort of odd. And I'll even correct them and say, well, no, actually my name is Victoria. And they'll say, oh, right, I'm sorry, Veronica. And it's just, it's funny. And, I think about the way that when I name my children, I feel like they could have had no other names than the names that my husband and I gave them. And to see their names on their birth certificates was so powerful. It made them real. These people who we knew were going to become the most important people in our lives, and we had given them these names. And the names had meaning and purpose for us. And as a writer, I take naming my characters very seriously. You know, some writers get very particular about it in a sort of how would I even put it? In a sort of researchy way. What an odd way to put it, right? But you know, they'll think of a meaning for a name first before giving it, and I have done that. My character in the Bone Church, Felix, his last name is Angel, which is angel in Czech, and originally I'd had him named Felix Volk. Volk is wolf, and there's also a cardinal named Cardinal Volk, and there was a Catholic element to the story. So I thought, well, maybe Volk, but in the end, I ended up changing it to Angel. But it's funny, it did fit because, you know, he was this heroic character and he was sort of this angel in the story. And yet I'd really named him Angel because of a metro stop called Angel in Prague, where I had actually first come up with the idea for writing the Bone Church. So it also had tremendous personal significance to me. And to this day, I love the name Felix Angel. And, you know, when I hear it, that is a real person for me. And similarly with Magdalena, his love interest, I'd always just found that name to be incredibly beautiful and seductive. And it also harkens back to Mary Magdalene. And so it has all these sort of virgin and whore components to it that I think are very sexy. And so I always wanted to name a character Magdalena, and I did, and so loved it. And I am thinking about all these things now as I name mostly my minor characters in this epic series. It's funny, you know, my main characters are named Nif and Shirin. Now, Nif, I know that is a very odd name for a male protagonist, for a male hero and a lover. It's interesting how you know, my husband has brought it up, although he has since backed off on it. I think he's on board with my naming my character Nif now, but it is just such an odd name, you know, and and I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a name you really couldn't attach to a particular time, place, or ethnicity, as I am sort of making up this very early civilization that these souls are from and end up traveling through time together. And so I wanted Nif to be, I wanted the male character to have this sort of very short and a short name that you couldn't easily nail, you know, that you couldn't easily ascribe any sort of stereotype to, other than it sounds rather odd. And I became very, very attached to that name. And even when some of my friends sort of made fun of it a little bit and were like, are you sure you want to do that? I was like, yes, I'm sure I can make this work. This man is a hero. This man is handsome. He is everything you would want in a man, in a soul, because no matter what body he inhabits, he is this person. And Nif, I think, is a powerful name, and I have made it into a powerful name, I think, within this powerful character. And it very much reminds me of the way I named my own children, because I always felt like their names had tremendous significance as well. And Shirin, who is my female character, is actually named after a woman who I had become friends with. She was a British Pakistani who I was friends with, 25 years ago. And I haven't seen her in 25 years, actually. So, Shirin, if you're watching this, I've named a character after you. And I just really liked this woman. You know, I just had such a good feeling from her. I felt like she had a really good soul, and she had a really lovely love story with her husband. She had just gotten married when I knew her, and she was just engaged actually when I knew her, and then got married. And so I just thought that would be a very fitting name for a young lover. And you know, and as I think about what why it is so important to nail a name, to get it right, and maybe not to be so clinical about it and not to be so literal, because the most powerful names that I've come up with are not literal, are not sort of the satirical names of, Humbert Humbert, for instance. But actually, that's a great name. I can't complain about it. But, you have all these, kind of like really butch names for action stars. You might have these really crazy sort of comical names in comedies. But I think in a love story, you must find something that is unique to that character, that is perhaps original and only evocative of a past love story, perhaps from literature or history, And I think it is so important when naming lovers that they have names that they can truly own and that are not foils for the story or winks or nods to something within the story, but something that they themselves possess and that then the reader can possess as they read the story of these two people who are so enamored of one another and would do anything for one another, and in the end up doing great feats for, say, humankind or for their communities or whatnot, because of this passion that they feel. So that is really what I've been thinking about this week, and I would love to hear from writer friends. I usually hear from my writer friends privately and not in the comment section here, which is kind of funny, but I understand it. And we've been having all sorts of talks about names, and I'm hoping to continue this conversation this week with another writer friend of mine, and we'll hopefully be able to post it on a new series that I'm hoping to start, which I will tell you all about probably next week. Or next time. Not that these are also chronological. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you later.